So Mexico City is a place of paradoxes, of conundrums, and of water that it's there, but you don't see it.
There's parts of the cities where you would never know just by looking at them that there's any water crisis around. They have clean water 24 hours a day, apparently just as abundant as it would be in New York or something like that. Then you have other parts of the city where people are living in very, very extremely precarious water situations. Low-income parts of Mexico City and the people that live around it are now facing a situation where they open the tap and no water comes out. It's a very tragic story of having all of the water in the world and somehow ending up being a city that today is on the list of top 10 cities most likely to run out of water. You have to do something, and so we do.
Enrique Lomnitz's hometown, Mexico City, is in a water crisis that gets worse by the day. He started social enterprise Isla Urbana to stem the tide. They design and build cheap and simple systems that catch and clean rainwater.
There's nothing new about rainwater harvesting. People have been harvesting rainwater since they first opened their mouths and looked up at the sky at the same time. It seemed to us like a logical thing, just figure out how we can use this water that we have available to us as kind of like a first part of a larger solution. It's a situation that affects women very particularly. Mostly it's women who tend to be more kind of in charge of managing the household. And basically their lives start, circling around these water issues.
¿Por qué tienes que lavar tus platos aquí?
Pues adentro no tenemos fregadero, como no tenemos instalación de agua, pues lo lavamos aquí en el lavadero. Y además así pues usamos poca agua y además ponemos abajo un bote para que el agua que sale de enjuagar los trastes.
Elizabeth is one of 11 people living in this house on the edge of Mexico City. She's also one of 2.5 million people who don't have access to permanent and safe drinking water.
En mi casa no tenemos ninguna red, ninguna toma de agua. Tenemos que comprar pipas, pero ha habido veces que tarda hasta 2 meses.
But going thirsty isn't where Elizabeth and her family's problems end.
The economic implications of not having water are very interesting. And people that rely on water trucks, for example, they often have to have somebody at home all the time to wait for a possible water truck arrival. So there's often someone that can't work at all. They just need to always be at home.
What's strange about Mexico City, though, is it isn't some barren desert. It's wet. Really wet.
Here we'll have 1 hour where it's like apocalyptic. The sky is just falling and there's lightning and thunder and rivers in the streets.
During the rain season, you will have floods. Those floods can last for days.
Mexico City gets considerably more rain than a city like London does, for example.
The question that comes to one's mind is, if we have so much water resources, why do we have to be in such a bad situation?
The water crisis in Mexico City is, a 400-year-old story. Mexico City started off being a city on an island in the center of a lake in this basin high up in the mountains. And over the course of 400 years, basically the city has focused on draining all of these ancient lakes out of the aquifer and building a giant modern city in its place. So where you had this 2,000 square kilometer lake, you now have just city as far as the eye can see.
You see a lot of highways and a lot of avenues and streets who have the name of rivers. Those streets were actually rivers 50, 60 years ago.
To provide for its vast population, around 1,800 wells pump water out of the ground, depleting the aquifer below. But because the city is prone to deadly flooding, it's built a massive infrastructure to get the water out quickly when it rains. The result? Not enough water filters down to recharge the aquifer.
The loss of that water that you can actually see is paralleled with the drying up of all of the aquifers. We're just pumping and pumping and pumping water out of the ground to the degree that actually Mexico City is physically sinking.
More than 10 meters in the last century. Monuments need steps added for people to reach them. Streets rise and fall, sinkholes open up the earth. And the water from the ground isn't enough to quench the city's thirst. 30% of its water is imported from outside the city. But the infrastructure is so old and huge, not only is 40% of water lost through leaks, but much of what does make it can become contaminated. Many people end up spending a significant portion of their income on expensive bottled water.
People don't trust the quality of the water they get out of the grid, even in areas where it's actually quite good. 98% or so of the population doesn't drink tap water. They buy water from purifiers, from these like filter stores that will fill your like 5-gallon jugs. We're industrial designers, and we were looking for problems to solve. People just started telling us about water, and they started telling us about how their water situation was getting worse and worse.
Isla Urbana installed their first system here in Ayusco, on the southern edge of the city. It didn't take long for people to realize the benefits.
Little by little, almost all of the neighbors have started harvesting rainwater themselves. We're working with communities so that they can become self-reliant in getting their own water supply and securing their own water. It needs to be as simple as possible. Rain falls on the roof, goes through the gutters, goes through the pipe, diverts the first volume, goes into a tank, gets chlorinated. You let the little bits of dust settle, and then you pump that water out and give it just some simple filtration. That water you can just connect directly into your house's existing plumbing system. So you open the tap in the kitchen and that's the rainwater that's coming out. For families in these areas that are very, very water stressed, starting to harvest rainwater can mean sometimes doubling the amount of water that you actually have available. 95% or so of the water that's used in a household is not for drinking. It's for everything else. And so that's really where you want to hit first, because that's where you're going to make the biggest first difference. So we want to have our baseline system be as affordable as possible, but designed in such a way that you can add new like treatment systems to it so that you can eventually stop having to buy drinking water as well. The water, it's water, except it's just water that's reaching your house via falling on you from the sky instead of coming from the city's water grid.
Entonces, pues sí se ve una claridad con agua de, ahora sí de la delegación que con agua de lluvia. O sea, sí se ve la diferencia entre que una agua y otra.
Ahora, al instalar el sistema, el agua está ahí almacenada y sale perfectamente limpia. Es algo, antes no, antes nos daba temor, o sea, una bandejita de agua, ya la voy a tirar y todo esto, ¿no? Había miedo, ¿no? Había miedo de que se terminara el agua o cosas así. Me da mucha seguridad y no estoy dependiendo de la delegación que me mande la pipa de agua. En realidad, en cuanto al tema económico, pero por supuesto el agua de lluvia, no, nadie nos cobra ni un peso por la captación de agua de lluvia.
We get usually between 700 and 1,000 liters of water per year for every square meter of roof. So if you have a house that has, say, 100 square meter roof, it's not a huge house at all. A house like that can get up to around 100,000 liters of water per year. The problem at that point becomes they just don't have enough tanks to store it all. Mexico City should be able to get at least 20 to 30% of its water demand through rainwater harvesting systems, which is very significant. It's an incredible amount of water.
Guaranteeing water goes way beyond quenching thirst and saving money. It could also save a city from itself.
You have health, economic, social, political problems. If you divide the amount of water that gets into the network every second, every inhabitant of Mexico City should get 350 liters per day.
If the entire eastern part of Mexico City runs out of water, there's going to be incredible amounts of social friction and discontent and political crises. We all live in this valley. We all need to be okay.
The local government has recognised the perilous position the city finds itself in, and last year invested in 10,000 of Isla Urbana's systems. They plan to install 100,000 by 2024.
Tenemos medido que la gente que tiene instalados estos sistemas de cosecha de lluvia tiene posibilidad de tener entre 6 y 8 meses agua suficiente en vivienda, lo cual le quita presión a la extracción que nosotros hacemos en los distintos pozos que existen en la ciudad.
many believe regenerating areas of nature holds the key to protecting cities from problems like water sustainability.
We are not going to be able to return to the Aztec city in the middle of the lake. That's gone. But we can have a new water model for the city. A model where we keep water, we have rivers, we have small lakes, and water can be a friend and an ally and not a foe like it's today.
When it comes to running out of water, Mexico City isn't alone. LA, Cape Town, Sao Paulo, the list is growing, each with millions of inhabitants facing devastating water crises. They're serving as a warning as more of the globe's population migrates to urban centres.
Mexico City in 1940 had maybe 1.5 million inhabitants, and today has close to 23 million people. And this incredibly violent growth, this incredibly fast expansion of the city has put unbelievable stress on all of the natural systems that provide us with things like water.
Since 2009, Isla Urbana have installed more than 20,000 of their harvesting systems, mostly on top of low-income homes in Mexico City and in rural communities. Their devices catch a combined 800 million litres of water each year, providing some 120,000 people with a significant portion of their water needs.
I believe a lot in the empowerment aspect of this. How do we transition to being a society where everybody is actively participating in water management and is actually harvesting their own water and taking care of it and not relying on this other system?
Que pues agua cada vez hay menos, entonces no está de más cuidarla, y aparte es un ejemplo que nosotros vamos a dar a nuestros hijos y a los niños, y que ahorita nosotros tenemos agua, pero no sabemos si las demás generaciones van a tener. Pues lo más preciado, aquí lo más preciado, porque sin agua pues no seríamos nada. Pero cuando no, pues la tenemos que cuidar como oro.